Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video. I'm Honey, part of the team who make up Colouring Heaven. This week we have a brilliant tutorial for you. Our artist Jo will be teaching you how to colour a watercolour sunset as well as how to colour snow. I'm sure you'll love this one. Jo has some great tricks up her sleeve for this technique. Don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. This design is from our Colouring Heaven collection Percy the Park Keeper issue, which you can get your hands on via the link in the description. But for now, let's see what Jo has to teach us.
In this demonstration, I will be showing you how to colour snow using watercolour pencils on this exclusive design, which is from Colouring Heaven collection Percy the Park Keeper. The first part of the demonstration will be the sky, in order to provide a backdrop to the falling snow. When I'm using a watercolour technique, I usually do it first, as there's a chance that it will go awry, so I don't want to do a lot of detail colouring first and then have to do it again. Now, skies are challenging to colour. The artist Turner practised by painting thousands of watercolour skies. So practice this technique on other paper first before you start colouring your image, and have a few goes until you have an effect that you are happy with. So I'm going to move this to one side and then do some practice demonstrations for you first. So to start with, what are watercolour pencils? Well, they are watercolour pigments that have been put into a pencil form. You lay the colour down on a piece of paper and then you activate it using water. They're actually a lot easier to control and a lot less messy than using watercolour paints. I'm using Derwent Watercolour Pencils for this demonstration, but there are many other different types available. So I'm going to start by just showing you how to do a quick swatch of colour. So this is a Derwent Watercolour number 11. So I'm just going to start, I'll show you how to do a gradient. So we're going to start with it a bit darker on one side, lighten it a bit. There. Now the water can be applied, and there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either apply it with a brush. The best sort of brush to use if you're doing a larger area of colour is a mop brush. So this is a brush with bristles that go together at a little bit of a point at the end. Or you can use a watercolour wash brush, which is a much flatter brush like this. You can get these brushes at all sorts of different types and brands available, so you should be able to find one at any art supplier. The other way you can apply it is using a water brush. Here's a water brush, and this is a barrel containing water with a nylon tipped brush at one end. This I generally find is easier if you're going to be doing a more detailed colour, because it's got a very fine point that's quite robust. So I'm going to start off demonstrating with this. So you give it a bit of a squeeze to get the water coming through, and it's quite a good idea to just dab it off on a piece of kitchen roll first, because the first time it comes through it comes out in a bit of a splodge, so you want to get the bristles nice and damp. Right, now we're going to apply it to this swatch. Now if you're moving from a light area to a darker area, it's best to start on the light area first. So I'll be working over to my left like this, and then if you want to you can work back again, so you get a nice smooth gradient. If you go the other way around, I'll just show you what happens if you go around the other way. So I'll do another swatch here. if you start straight away at the darker end, it tends to pull the pigment all the way across and you don't get such a nice gradient. So yeah, always start the light end first. This water brush actually is, I should have mentioned, it's a Pentel water brush. I got it in a set of 3, which came with fine, medium and broad points, and I'm using the medium one here. When you're applying the water, try not to put on too much or you'll find that the paper will start to buckle. I'll just show you with a different colour how you might use it on a small precise surface. So I'll just colour in a little diamond shape here. So what you do there is you just use the very tip like that, and you see you can get very accurate colour going there. Always have a piece of kitchen roll on hand. So I'm just going to show you a few other colours that we might want to use for this demonstration. So here's another one. This is a sort of snowy sky colour. So again, colour it from the light, paint it from the light to the dark, and back again. And there we go. Another thing, and that's useful to think about, is which part of the pencil tip you use. If you're working in a small area like this, as I've been doing, you'll probably use the tip of the pencil because you're going to be covering quite a small area. But if you're trying to cover the whole of the night sky, as we've got here, it's actually much quicker if you use the pencil on its side like this. Now, it looks a bit rough and messy to start with, doing it like that, but what you'll find, this is one of the advantages of the watercolour pencils. Once you apply the water, here we go, it brings it together and makes it into a lovely smooth finish. So it's a good way and a quick way of colouring large areas. But before I move on to colouring the rest of the sky, I'm just going to talk to you about masking fluid, which is something that we're going to be using. Masking fluid is a lightly coloured liquid. Here we go, see if I can show you what's inside the pot. Here we go. It's got a little bit of pigment in it, mostly comprised of rubber latex. And you put it over areas of work that you want to protect, which means that you can then use your watercolour pencils in broad swatches in the background. So in the design we're doing today, we've got all these snowflakes in the background. It would take hours if we were trying to colour around every single one. But what you can do is you can put masking fluid on each snowflake, and that will keep them looking clean until you've put your sky in. You can also use masking fluid around the edges, the tree, back of the animals. Another thing that you can do is for these straight edges, you can just mask them off with masking tape. I'm going to be using a masking fluid called Pebeo drawing gum. I've got it in this bottle. I've also got, this is the really good one for snowflakes, I've also got it in a sort of pen form. It's the Pebeo drawing gum again, and I'm going to show you this to colour the snow. So you have to get it going, you squidge it down a few times. Now you can see it's starting to come out. It's slightly coloured, so you can see where you've been. And I'm now going to colour in the snowflakes. Well, I'm not colouring them really. I'm going to cover the snowflakes with the masking fluid. Right, so that's the snowflakes finished. Next of all, I'm going to do the masking tape, if I could see where I've put it. So with masking tape, it's a good idea to just press it against your clothes first to get a bit of the sticky off, so it doesn't stick too hard to the paper and tear it when you lift it off. So we'll just stick it there along the straight edge. There we go. And then we'll put some down the side of the shed as well. There we go. So we need to mask off the tree and the animals' backs. So I'm going to go round the edge of these items using the pen again, because it's a little bit more accurate. And then I'll put a bit more masking fluid on using the liquid and the brush. So we'll just colour around here. So next we move on to the fluid. Once you've used it, well, when you use this liquid, you want to use a brush, a cheap brush that you don't really care about very much, because the latex can quite easily ruin the brushes, and you have to wash it straight away after you've used it. So here we go. Now my liquid is very thick. I don't know if that's because it's a little bit old or if that's how it actually comes, but here we go. I'll squidge it on. You can see how much thicker it is. And cover quite a lot, covering all of this, because once you get swishing away with the watercolour, you don't quite know where it's going to end up. Go. Put it on nice and thickly. As you can see, with this liquid being quite thick, it's hard to do the edges accurately, so it is a really good idea to have a pen as well as the liquid in the brush. There we go. I think that's everything. Right, so now I'm going to have to go and wash my brush straight away. So I'll be back in a second. Right, there, my brush is now nearly clean. It's quite a good idea to use a completely separate brush that you just keep for applying masking fluid, because it is really difficult to get it out completely. So I'm going to go back on to colouring the sky now. I'm going to move this out of the way for a minute, let the masking fluid dry completely, and experiment again with some sky options. So thinking about sky, they are usually lighter at the horizon, so I'm going to take that into account. And we also need to think about, on the drawing, whether we're going to use a brush or the water brush. And I think for the sky, I'm going to apply the water with the soft brush, because it is softer, which means it'll pass over the spots of masking fluid more easily. Now, I'm not going to use a source photograph for colouring the sky. I'm just going to imagine what a snowy winter night sky might look like. However, do feel free to use source images for inspiration, because the skies that nature produces are often more amazing than you could possibly imagine. So I'm just going to practice how I might combine my sky. So I'm going to start off with indigo, a dark blue for the dark top of the sky. And I actually think I'm going to have to turn my paper over onto the side to do this. Here we go. So I can cover a bigger area like you would have on the actual design. So I'm using my pencil on my side, on its side, as I've said before. Starting off darker, getting a little bit lighter, ready to merge into the next colour. So I'm imagining that the sun's recently set, and so there's a bit of light still coming up over the horizon. So I'm going to move into sort of purpley colours next. So I'm going for a darker shade of purple here. This is a number 12. Here we go. So I start, overlap the colours like this. Then gradually fade that one out. Use a lighter shade. This is, let's see, let's go for the light violet, 26. There we go, this is slightly lighter. And then that one can go into the pinky number 11. It's a bit of a pinkier colour, going down to the horizon. Now what you can do, you can also add in, for a bit of variety, you can add in some other colours. So I've got a blue-grey here. can just mix up a few different colours and brighter blue, a few streaks of that, just to make it more interesting. There we go, and perhaps some Delft blue here. Right then, so now we're ready to have a go with the water. So I'm going to dip my brush. It's useful when you're using water. It's a good idea to have two separate water pots. A clear one, a clean one for wetting your brush, and then another one that you can use for rinsing your brush off when you finish with it. So I've got a bit of water on my brush, not too much. Actually, that's a little bit too much. I'll dab it on my kitchen roll. So I start at this end. Move up, and I'm going to go back down again to merge the colours in a little bit more. There we go. Now if you want to speed things up rather than waiting for it to dry naturally, you can use a hairdryer. So that's what I'm just going to go and do now. Now what you can do is once you've done one layer of colour, you can always put on another layer if you want to. So for example, if you felt that this little bit of purple colour down here was too pale, you could put on a little bit more. So we could put a bit more colour on here. A bit more on there. Now perhaps you want to bring the darker purple down a little bit more. Go like that. Darken it up a bit. Right, apply your water brush again. Here we go. Put the water on again. Rinse my brush out. Right, I'm off to the hairdryer again. Here I am back with a dry design. Now one of the advantages of using watercolour pencils as opposed to watercolour is that once you've done the paint, is if there are bits that you're still not happy with, for example this indigo here is looking a bit streaky, you can just colour back into it with the pencil. Even it out a bit. You might want to put, so I've got a little bit of a splodge here, so you could, for example, colour around that so it's not quite so obvious. It doesn't really matter if you have splodges or streaks though when you're doing a sky, because skies are naturally unevenly coloured, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So there we go. I think that's a sky effect that I'm happy with. So the next step is apply it to your design. So I am actually going to lay this down on its side while I'm colouring it, because it is a lot easier. I'm going to start off with indigo. Here we go, number 36. Lay it on its side. The pencil does catch a little bit on the masking fluid, so you have to be a little bit careful because you don't want to accidentally pull all of the masking fluid off again. But on the other hand, it doesn't matter if you've left, there's a little bit of a white gap around the masking fluid, because once you apply the water, that will get filled in. And you can practice more than once. I mean, try out all sorts of different sky effects if you want to before you actually start applying it to your design. It doesn't even need to be a gradient wash like I've done. I mean, it might be a sky with different coloured clouds on it. Or you might want to put a moon in or something. So again, it really doesn't matter if your colour isn't particularly even, because the water is going to smooth all of that out. So I'm getting lighter as I go down the paper, ready to transfer into purple. So I think I'm just going to turn my pencil round and use the tip to darken up this top bit. So we want the sky at the top to really be quite dark. Right then, next colour, here we go. Because snowy skies do look quite grey. So let's just put in a little bit of that. So then we're going over to the darker purple colour. Right, then from the purple we're going into the lilac. And as we're thinking about sunsets, we'll do a little bit of pink down at the horizon. And then join it up with the darker pink that I was using earlier on. So we'll run that up. The lilac's looking a bit wishy-washy, so we're going to run this pink up into the lilac. There we go. Right then, now we're ready to apply the water. So remember, it doesn't matter if this comes out too pale, it doesn't matter because we can always do another wash over the top. Another reason that I'm using my mop brush for this is that it does keep a nice lot of water in its bristles. So you don't want to really run out of water halfway through and have to wet your brush again. So here goes. Start on that side, clean it off a bit. Come up from that side. Here we go. Now I'm going to have to stop and get a little bit more water. And then pick this up. And run it up the page. And we'll run the colour back down again. Right, my brush has run out of water, so I'm going to stop there. Right, now I'm going to go and have another go with the hairdryer. I'll be back shortly. So, looking at my result, I think it's looking a little bit pale in this middle area. So I'm going to do another wash. I'm going to bring the blue down a bit more. Another thing you have to watch out for is your hand gets stuck on the masking fluid. I'm going to fill in a little bit here. There we go. Right, so I'm going to wet my brush again, make sure it's clean. So I'm going to start here. Run the wash up there. Fresh my brush. Carry on up here. There. There we go, that's darkened it up quite a bit. So that's the wash finished with. I'm now going to do the next stage, which is the touching in. So I'm going to start off with my indigo. Yeah, just colour around some of the bits. So I haven't quite gone up to the edge in some places, so I'm just going to colour that in. Even out a few of these streaks. Like I said, it doesn't matter, you can leave a lot of the streaks in. go. I'm just making sure it gets right up close to the edge. There we go, touching these white bits here. Then move over to the purple. Just to make sure it goes right up to the edge. Just moving, there's a bit of a line there, so I'm just going to put a little bit of colour in there. Perhaps a little bit here, just to soften that line down a bit. There we go, there's a white bit there. Do a bit of smoothing there. And then I'm just going to accentuate a bit of the pink right down here. Bit more purple there. Then the pink. Put a little bit more in there. And one more little bit just round here. Needs filling in. There we go. Right, then the next stage is to let your drawing completely dry before you take the masking fluid off. Right, now the paint has dried, the next step is taking off all the masking fluid and the masking tape. Now the masking fluid should just peel off. Some of it you can just rub off with your finger. So the masking fluid that was over the tree, for example, is coming off quite easily, like this. Some of it has stuck quite hard, so at that point it really helps if you've got fingernails, because you can just scrape it off with your fingernails like this. It is quite a long task to get all of this off. Take the masking tape off really slowly so you don't catch the paper. So there we go, that's all the masking fluid and masking tape removed. One thing to note is that if you are using masking fluid, it's a good idea to put it on, do the painting, let the paint dry, and then take the masking fluid off straight away. We're now going to move on, and I'm going to do the light coming out of the doorway and the animals waiting on the steps. So I'm going to start. What I'm going to do first actually is I'm going to colour this coat that's hanging in the doorway, and then I'm going to let that dry while I'm doing the animals, and then I'm going to do the light over the top. So we're going to just colour these clothes in shades of grey because the light will leach out the rest of the colour. And this time I'm colouring over the snowflakes because we're going to use a different technique to whiten them this time, which is going to be using a Posca pen. So here we go. We're going over the clothes, putting in some of the darker shadows here. It'll be darker under there, it'll be darker under the belt, it'll be darker under the flap of the bag, it'll be darker there, it'll be a bit darker down there. Then onto the spade. And again, the bit of the spade that's leaning against the wall will be more shadowed. There we go. And this bit of the wall here will be in shadow as well. There we go. So I'm going to use my water brush. Right, so just go over this with the water brush to wet the colour up. So one of the advantages of using watercolour pencils is that it is quicker. Because the watercolour brush then smooths out your shading. There we go, so that can dry. Now we're going to move on to doing the animals. So the badger is going to be in shades of black and grey. Just sharpen my grey pencil. So I'm going to start off by using the gunmetal grey, same as I used for the coat, that's number 69. Here we go, and when you put the colour on, to denote the fur, you can put it on in single lines like this, or in zigzags, but you definitely don't want to use a circular motion, because you want to get the feel of his fur. Again, we don't need to worry about going around the snowflakes. I don't know why I assume that the badger is a boy. So this part will be left white. As badgers have a white stripe on them. I'll carry on this bit down here. And carry on the white stripe. So I'm going to leave that there. So that's his body covered with the grey. So you can go much quicker if you're using watercolour pencils. And then I'm going to darken up the face with a bit of black. Here we go. And leave the ear white. So here's his face slightly darker. And under the chin is a bit darker as well. Paws, bit of black on the paws. Before colouring these animals, you can do research on the internet to check how you want to colour them. There we go. Right, I'm just going to put a little bit more colour in. There we go. Now taking the water brush, again what you can do, oh, a bit too much water on there. What you can do is use the water brush in such a way that you're making strokes as well. To keep up the fur impression. And all you need to do, so I've covered this, I've been using the water brush on this black area now. I want to go back onto the lighter grey, so I just dab it on some kitchen roll to remove the black pigment, and then go back into doing the grey. Careful to go around the duck's beaks. There we go. And back up under the paw. Down to his feet. Again, taking a bit of the excess black off my brush with the kitchen roll. There we go, and then there's just a bit under the chin to do. Again, take off the excess pigment. Come back with a clean brush. There we go. Just let that dry. So for the ducks, what I'm going to do for the ducks is, because the ducks are white, they're going to be picking up a bit of a reflection of the colour of the sky on their backs. So their fronts will have colour from the light from the doorway, and their backs will have colour from the sky. So I'm picking up one of the colours I used for the sky, which is number 11. And I'm just going to very lightly put a little bit on the backs of their heads. This one's back. Oh, a bit of masking fluid there. And then, oh, I think the tops of their heads as well. There we go. Tips of the wings, a little bit down there. Then beaks and legs, yellow, deep cadmium number 6. Then they're going to be in a little bit of shadow as well, so under their wings, using a little bit of the gunmetal grey again. So there's a shadow there, then they're going to have shadow on their tummies, bit of shadow under there, bit of shadow there. Right, back with the water brush. So I'm going to start with the sky coloured areas. Now if you use your brush at an angle like this, with the point in the darkest part, you can actually get a nice gradient going. You can see what I'm doing. Because we don't want this to be too bright or all over the ducks. Just want a touch. There, you see what I'm doing? I've got the point up against there and I'm leaning it over on its side and I'm just moving across like that. That's giving me a nice gradient from the dark to the light. And a bit on the wingtips, a bit there. There we go. Now I'm going to clean my brush on kitchen roll again. The next bit is the shadow. I'm going to do the same thing. Tilt my brush over. Then I'm going to have to turn my hand round like that. There we go. And just do there. Again, clean your brush. Just wake up. Beak and the legs. So the next one to do is the hedgehog. Now a hedgehog will be shades of brown. So I'm going to go in with a dark brown on the back, which is a number 32. And again, do sharp movements with your pencil to mimic the way that the hedgehog's spines go. Oh, my pencil's just broken. I'm using a manual pencil sharpener. This is a Staedtler sharpener, which I find to be very good. I do have a whole box of them because I get through them quite quickly. Right. So that's the spines done. And I think hedgehogs have a little bit of dark around their nose. There we go. And then their tummies are a paler brown. So I'm going in with a lighter shade of brown. Just very light covering. I think they're kind of a browny cream. Oh, and I've missed out his hands, or paws as I should say. So I'm going to come back, just do them in the darker brown. Now the water brush. Again, dab it on the kitchen roll to make sure it's clean after your last use. I'm going to do the spines first. There we go. So use the brush in the same way that you've been using the pencil for the spines. Dab it in and do sharp marks, because what we don't want with a hedgehog is an even smooth finish. We want to give a feel of those spines. There we go. His hands are a little bit smoother off paws. They look like hands, don't they? There we go. And now do the bit on his nose. Then clean the brush again. And just do the lighter part. There, that's the hedgehog done. Now the mice. It's a good idea when you're colouring to try and use quite a limited palette to make the overall colouring look harmonious. So what I'm going to do with the mice is I'm going to make them brown mice, but I'm going to pick up the lighter shade of brown that I used for the hedgehog's tummy, and I'm going to do the mice with that. Now I'm thinking my mice are going to have lighter coloured tummies, so I'm going to focus my shading on their backs. And leave their tummies uncoloured. So I'm just putting a bit of colour down their backs. And I'm going to use the watercolour pencil as I was using with the ducks. I'm going to use it in a sort of this leaning over position, so the mice will be darker along their backs, and then the colour will gradually fade over their tummies. And again, these are quite small, so I'm getting a bit too much water on my brush, so I'm dabbing my brush each time before I colour one of the mice. There we go. Now just their ears and their tails, so I think they ought to be pink. So I'm coming in with the pink crayon in a second, just give that a sharpen because it's a very small area to cover. There we go, pink. Pink ears. I'm not going to try and use the water brush on the tails and the ears because they are too small and they're already looking fine with just the pencil. Or they also have pink noses. There. So that's the animals done. The next thing we're going to look at is the light from the doorway. So what we need to think about is the direction in which the light is shining. It's going to be coming out in straight lines from the doorway, so it's going to be going up, horizontal and down. But I think because the fire, you have to decide what sort of light you're actually going to be drawing. I mean, it could be an electric light, which is cool, a cool shade of yellow, or it could be the light from a wood fire, which is a much warmer colour. So I'm going to go for the wood fire option, so we'll be assuming that the fire is probably at ground level in the room. So the light is going to be stronger at the bottom of the doorway than it is at the top. So I'm going to colour firstly with a warm yellow. This one is called Deep Cadmium, number 6. So I'm just going in with the colour, the yellow, and colour over the coat, which is now dry. So I'm just colouring in fairly quickly. Now down at the bottom of the door, the colour from the fire is going to be stronger. So I'm going to do it as a warmer orange colour. And go over the coats and the spade. I'm just going to bring the yellow down a bit more to meet with the orange. The light, as I've said, is going to be coming out of the doorway. So the next thing we need to do is think about which objects and creatures the light is going to be hitting. So it's going to be reflecting on the door frame. So we'll put some yellow around there. Down at the bottom it's going to be more of an orangey colour. It's not going to be such a strong light as what is in the room. The next thing that the light is going to be catching is all of the animals. One thing you need to think of at this point is that the further away from the light source something is, the fainter the reflected light will be. So the badger is picking up the most intense light as he's right by the doorway. It's quite handy having these white bits because you can really show the colour on them. So I'm putting quite a lot of yellow on, and we're going over the bits of fur I've already coloured in. And then down to the tummy. Again, the whole of the badger's body is going to be lit down to the toes. But because the badger is so close to the doorway, I'm going to put on some of the orange colour onto the tummy. Because the badger is getting the full effect of the light. There we go. Now the ducks are further away, so I'm just going to do them with the yellow. So the light is catching them on their face, and then round onto their chest, and perhaps a little bit along the edge of this wing there. Hedgehog is even further away, so we'll just put in a bit of yellow here. It doesn't show up that much against the fur. There we go. And the mice, putting a bit more yellow on the ducks, the mice are furthest away of all, so they're hardly going to get any yellow at all. So I'm just putting a little bit on their noses. There we go. Before I do the next stage, I'm going to use the water brush on this part. So dab it on kitchen paper, and then we'll start. So just move it around the doorway. Oh, I think I'm getting a bit of the grey on there, so let's clean it up a bit more. There we go. Just go straight over the coat. One of the good things about watercolour pencils is when you've put on one layer of colour, as we have with the coat, you can just go straight, well, once it's dry, you can go over with another layer of colour. So watercolour is transparent, unlike some of the other types of paint. You can put a layer on top of another layer and still see some of the original layer through it. Now the animals. So again, I'm going to move I think I've picked up a little bit of the black there that obviously hadn't woken up with the water beforehand, so you need to watch out for that. There we go. And now the ducks. The hedgehog and the mice. While that's drying, I'll do the next bit of colouring. So as well as the animals, the light from the doorway is also going to catch the tree, the steps, and this other tree here. So I'm going to put a bit of yellow down the side of this tree. Again, make it a bit darker along the edge that's closest to the light, and then fade as it moves further away. There will also be light falling on the tops of the steps. Fainter as you get further away from the door, and then hardly any on this step at all. As this step is closest to the orange part of the fire, I'm going to put a bit of orange in there. Actually, a bit more yellow as well. There we go. And the other thing that is catching the light is the tips of this pine tree. So just put a little yellow along there. So colouring with the water. Again, with these steps, I'm going to use that technique where I turn the pen over on its side. I'm going to colour like that to get a gradient. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing on the tree. And then I'm I'm just going to turn the paper upside down for a minute so I can do the other tree. Actually, I'm getting a really nice gradient there. Just finish the top off with the tip of the brush. What you can do is, if you take all the colour off the brush, you can then use the very tip. You can use the very tip to blend in like that. Just do little dabs there. But one very important thing, if you're trying to blend a wet area using your damp water brush, when you use the brush for the blending, it needs to have less water on it than is already on the page. That way you avoid getting watermarks. So we're turning the paper back round the right way. So that's the animals and the reflected light done. The only thing left now is to do the snowflakes. So the other way in which you can use the snowflake, you can colour the snowflakes, is by using a white Posca pen. I find that the Posca pen is more effective than using a gel pen. It gives a really nice opaque colouring. So you can actually go over some quite dark colours with it. I'm actually dabbing it. So I'm getting some nice blobs going on there. Now you can see it's really impressive how well it covers. And if there's a bit that isn't very well covered, you can always just go over it again. But there we go, look, it's gone over that grey spade really well. And there's some on the animals as well. Just check I've got them all. There, and that's that part of the colouring finished.
Hello again, Honey here. I hope you enjoyed following along with this tutorial. I can't wait to get my hands on some masking fluid to try Jo's clever snow technique. Don't forget you can get your hands on the Colouring Heaven collection Percy the Park Keeper issue, which was featured in this video, via the link in our description. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit the bell, and we'll see you next week for our next video. Bye!